Hello everyone and welcome back to the campaign diary for my Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign Aracséa edition. In today's session, the party faces the horrors of 10 towns past, witness the barbarity of Khotun and barely escape a terrible ambush. So for those keeping track of time, this session takes place on the 17th of Caerldin, and we just about kind of get to the end of the day by the end of the session, but we don't go past it. So I am going to preface this episode by saying that this is probably my favourite session of Rime so far. No joke at all. And I really hope before we get into it that there are some Forsburn fans out there, because boy is this episode full of Forsburn goodies. Some good character development here. This session really did have some of like the best roleplay we've had so far. Some of the best like forced almost like character advancement and the rise in potential for things to change in the future and getting back to those original ideas we set out to achieve at the beginning of the campaign. So much of this episode is actually prompted by a lengthy conversation I had with Carl about the original purpose for Forsburn, which is, if you recall, to teach the party, more specifically Raina, lessons about the nature of the world and to see that the harshities of the Frostgales and dire situations and the antagonistical forces which are out there and within each and every one of them. He was going to be sort of that antagonistic force for the rest of the party, and I felt, as did Carl, that he wasn't really achieving that. Forsburn, like much hadn't really happened with him. Trust was beginning to build, and as a result of this chat, and like with some other thoughts about the direction of the narrative as we approach the beginning of Act 2, and then the big shift in gameplay that will happen when that arrives, the events of this session were thereby born, thought of, and executed. So we begin with the party leaving the Eastside Inn and getting ready to trek to Easthaven to discover what news Haruna had for them, which required such urgency. They head off to the market in order to find like an early breakfast, and they arrive there, but they see no sign of Forsburn with them. He was with them when they left the inn, but somewhere between the inn and the market, he seemed to have disappeared. And while I made them search around a little bit to do various skill checks, we switch over to Forsburn's view. So for Forsburn, I described that in quick succession, and I rolled stealth checks, compared it against their passive perception because they had no idea this was going, and they all failed. So like a bag was thrown over his head first, and then there was this muzzle, one that is kind of specifically designed for Khotun, is like placed on his face, and he basically begins to be dragged off. Down the alleys. He struggles. He's allowed to struggle, of course, but he fails his strength checks. He puts together maybe like 4 people that are doing this to him. He does like this Jason Bourne tracking how long he's been dragged. Kind of, oh, okay, we've gone left here, gone right here. That kind of sense of direction kind of thing that they do in those spy films. And he's basically just keeping track of that for a little while, and then we go back to the other 2, and this is when Mutiny starts to worry, and she makes a survival check and begins to try and piece things together, and she kind of gives chase through the alleys and the winding claustrophobic streets of the east side of Termine, the wonky wooden buildings and things. And soon enough, Forsburn soon finds himself dragged out of town and into the woods north of Termine, and soon, not long after that, he begins to be hauled up onto a tree, which has like a pyre affixed to the base of this barren tree. All the while as well, while he's being dragged and all this stuff, he's being jabbed at, kicked, spat on, sworn at, name called, and all that sort of thing. Forsburn, now that he's up on the thing, is able to sleight of hand a knife that he has up his sleeve to kind of free his hands, but he specifically chooses not to move them. He keeps them in place to make it look like he is still entrapped. He was able to estimate about 4 enemies, humans to be precise, and Carl knew exactly who these folks were, as did Forsburn when that happened. You guys probably put it together as well. They were obviously Gruber and Marcus, the 2 dissenters who had a stare down with him at the Blue Clam the day prior. As a reminder, and just in case I didn't speak about them in that campaign diary, they were like two sons of these fathers that fought during the War of the Long Shelf 20 years ago, but they didn't return, and they kind of have this racial hatred and grudge against Khotun. And in fact, actually, any kind of non-human who they believed has kind of profited from their father's sacrifice, which is kind of what they accuse Horus of. You know, he is kind of a nepotistic rise to power, even though it wasn't, but you know, racial hatred does that kind of thing. So yeah, what we have here is basically a racially fueled hate crime happening against Forsberg, and I kind of understand if people have to switch off of this episode now, because obviously it's not a topic that a lot of people want to get involved with. Um, it's a difficult thing to talk about. Obviously it's wrong, and it can be, it can bring up things to some people. And I understand a lot of people play D&D to escape like real world issues. But I've always felt that it adds to like the authenticity of a setting when there are these sorts of aspects and details. It is, after all, a mature game we're playing. I trust my players can explore these problems, in a mature way, and if they have an issue, they trust me to, not go too far, and they know that we have that circle of trust where we know we can tackle these things, and and anything that occurs within it, we will have that, like I say, that trust. That it's all good. That it's, we're okay. That being said, it did result in in what I think is some of the best roleplay we've come to have in come the resolution. I'm not going to be able to do it justice in this diary, but it was truly amazing. So on to the rest of the diary. Not long after these four humans had set the fires at the pyre, Forsberg began to take a little bit of damage as the flames started to lick up his legs. The others arrive, the rest of the party, and a gruesome fight ensued. These dudes had a lot of hit points, and the fight ended up going on for 2 hours. And I did not foresee it lasting that long, but it did. And at any rate, it got very gruesome. Raina beat one of them to a pulp in her rage, pretty much. The guy, Marcus, I remember describing him as being completely, his face was bruised, black and blue, really swollen up, his eyes barely seeing, he's spitting blood, obviously looking like he had enough. He was done. He wasn't going to do anything, but she just kept going to town, clawing him to pieces. It was that kind of barbarity that she'd got to in her rage. Mutiny in this fight was actually able to land a lot of her hits uncharacteristically for a ranger, and of course you can imagine Forsberg, who just couldn't stop shouting or trying to shout, given that he had his muzzle on this entire time, and was just going to town with great pleasure in semi-torturing these humans as he was getting these kills in and attacks in and things. Soon enough, 3 of the thugs were dead, and which left only Gruber remaining, one of the men that had stared Forsberg down. And it's here where Forsberg, who was already going apeshit, was going just more apeshit at this point. This frantically, trying to get his muzzle off. Something that he does kind of just use, that this is a implement of war, basically, used by humans 20 years ago. And he's unable to speak, but he was able to send a message to Mutiny, because she has her psi crystal. She can open up that communication. That's basically, he kind of just went, "This last one is mine," whatever that meant. And then this is where we kind of entered into slightly disturbing territory, if it weren't bad enough. In his rage, he kind of refused to let any of the human characters, Dagna or Raina, close to him to help him with his muzzle, even though clearly he wanted to get it off. After which he started spewing his own type of hatred about humans, this Khotun propaganda that he's had his whole life. This entire upbringing he's had for this, this learned hatred of humans became swelling up and just spat out, and mixed in with the trauma of what just happened to him. Gruber, who was now unconscious on the floor, who he had knocked unconscious, I should say, yeah, which is on the floor, and this is when Carl proceeded to describe the following events. All the while as well, I should also make a note to say here that Rayna, who was kind of like in a frozen rage state and bloodlust, um, kept seeing her, like her Dark Panther, the the beast from her backstory, the thing that keeps following her, let's call it, swirling around her and around Forsburn as kind of like this Percy, from Critical Role Artax kind of smoke cloud, and she couldn't help but like have that urge for him to get vengeance. Like she was thrilled and reveled by the entire gruesomeness of what was going on as a very opposite thought to how she normally is. And this is something we'll talk about a little bit later about why I made this happen to why I made her start to see this, and we'll talk about that a little later. So on to what Carl then describes, which so is the following. So Forsburn withdrew a bear trap from his pack. He opened it on the ground, he gave Gruber a health potion, and basically just began shouting obscenities about humans, saying that they're all the same, and how like Gruber thinks that he is the monster, and then basically just goes, well, okay, I'll show you a monster, picks the guy's head up and just chucks it into the middle of the bear trap. And you can imagine the reaction at the table, well over Discord, but still, the awkward silence that kind of followed, and was like, okay, that just happened. That kind of that moment when it just sank in what had occurred. Forsburn obviously continued to have this meltdown for a little while, just shouting and yelling and all this stuff. And it took some convincing from Rayna after he kind of wandered off, and after she had come out of her own trance, for him to calm down. At first, like, he didn't want anything to do. He didn't want her to come near her. Didn't want to speak to her. He's still spewing this, like, you humans are all the same. You don't know what you've done. Blah blah blah. All this stuff, all this pent up things that he's been told over the years, his upbringing, all of it. All that kind of stigma and everything. And she basically just kept on him, just insisted, like saying things like, what do you need to feel better? Like, do you want to hit me? Like, hit me. Or if that makes you feel better, like, cut me. Whatever. Do whatever you want if that's going to make you feel better. And there was some rolls here, there's some insight checks, there's a bunch of different things back and forth, like series of like fortunate dominoes, like kind of fell in place nicely. A lot of great role play, which again I just will not be able to emulate on this campaign diary. But there was some really good moments here. Carl actually told me after the session that this is some of his favourite role play from Dan, from Rayna's player, was in these moments when she had in her more serious edge. And eventually she convinces Forsburn to stay with them, and he just kind of went okay, and he just wanders off back to town, and and it's from here on that you really see a change, and the party will see a change in Forsburn. Like, they've seen kind of what he's been bred for, what he's truly made for. And from then on, Forsburn is just a lot colder, a lot more distant. Like I said, he's gone off back to the town, and when they eventually catch up to him, they see him looking at a silent image that he has cast, and he describes to them what Corvus, his commanding officer back in the Frost Clan, looks like, and he describes to them that he can see like the hatred in Forsburn's eyes as he's looking at this Corvus character. He doesn't say who it is, but I know, and obviously he knows, and it's more hints to this story. None of them questioning him on it actually. Forsburn's got some of the a really good, interesting story build up in this thing. He does have a good background, but none of them have really delved into it. None of them really seem. I don't know if they seem particularly interested, but I mean, to each their own. I think it's some great stuff we've got with Forsburn, and maybe if they did delve, they could help him out a little bit more. But alas, it is from here, as we continue on with the story, that the group leave for Brynchander. On their way out, they do hear the town crier all naming them Skulder of Tourmaline, and there's a little bit of booing and a little bit of, not booing, but there is some just chatter amongst the crowd, and most of it good. Most of them cheering. It's good to have local heroes again, but there are a few, obviously, people like Marcus and Gruber around that aren't happy with change, and the fact that the wandering Forsburn Twinblade is named one of them. So they get to Minshanda, and they do a little bit of shopping. Forsburn goes and gets some more rope and things like that. The Dagner goes off and gets a drink in Norfolk, and from there they then just head straight for East Haven. And it is here where the next big Forsburn thing happens. So as they're travelling through like this emerging blizzard that happens on the East Road, they come across a cart of sorts. It is surrounded by these big piles and dark gatherings of snow on the banks of either side of the road, and they cautiously begin to investigate it. There's a mix of perception checks, investigation rolls, and I also make Forsburn secretly make some insight and intelligence rolls, like through a private message. And over the course of the investigation, Rayner and Mutiny begin to find remains of human travellers, covered by this flapping cloth in the wind. There's like the faint puddling of blood that Mutiny notices. Forsburn, as well, who's been steadily backing away from the caravan this entire time, begins to put together a different story of what is happening in his head. And this entire time, while I'm getting the others to do stuff, him and I are sending private messages to each other. I could begin to leak some of this information for things that Forsman is slowly realizing as he's examining the scene. So I revealed to him his first inkling is like, this is a trap. And then he slowly starts to piece together that this seems familiar to him because it's kind of like a unique scenario employed by elite Khotun scout parties of the Frost Clan. It is then when he begins to piece this stuff together that he tells the party to get the hell out of there, that they're in so much danger, and he even describes to them that if they look at him, there is pure, genuine fear and beads of sweat on his brow, which is something that they've not seen from Forsburn. No, not really seen him scared or like legit afraid of, enemies before. But this time they do it. So they listen to him, and they begin to, with his guidance, kind of slowly move away. Forsburn doesn't really move. He starts to believe that whoever has set this up may still be nearby, and it's like purely through the fact that maybe there's not a trigger. Maybe they've just been lucky to avoid a trigger, whatever that alerts them to their presence, or the blizzard itself, maybe masking them that they're there. But anyway, he tells them to keep going, and they're asking why aren't you coming with us? And he says to just go, just get out of here, don't worry. As soon as they get beyond sight, he kind of realizes that these snow piles that are on the sides of the roads are off, and it is this kind of where he gets this idea. And Mutiny asks back to him now he's out of sight. It's like, what the hell are you going to do? And he simply replies with one word: diplomacy. And it is then where Carl and I went into a private voice channel, and for about half an hour, we began to roleplay, negotiate, discuss the following scenario, the second greatest roleplay moment of this, with basically 4 Frost Clan Khotun kind of emerge out of hiding, hidden in plain sight, kind of like Navy SEAL, SAS kind of style. They were right there and you didn't even notice, kind of thing. And I'm going to kind of just summarize all the bits that happened, because again, I will not be able to emulate the masterful RP that we both did. It was a lot of great moments here. They smell like the humans on him, and they can smell the fresh blood of the kill he's just made. They kind of ask him why he's traveling with them. Forsburn also kind of does a whole, let's cut the bullshit, why haven't you killed me yet, I'm an outcast. And they basically say they might have a use for him down the line. Forsburn is of course able to deduce these guys probably don't really care about him, and that tradition, he should be right. They are all but they are by all rights should kill him because he's an outcast, and that is like, yeah. Um, but they say they might have a job for him. Forsburn obviously knows that, gets the feeling that if he does this job and then when it's done, they're probably just going to kill him anyway. But it kind of just plants the seed that he may have a use. He may have another in for the Frost Clan. The leader of this group also says, like, they have heard. He says, like, don't think we haven't heard of you. Like, Corvus was a great guy, but we've always enjoyed your flair, kind of thing. Which is like another big little boost for him. They also reveal a few other things. They said, like, Forsman asked, like, what's their mission? Why are you so far south? And they said they're looking for outcast camps, but they fancied a trip down south to get some meat, in like exclamation marks. And like, they kind of reveal that the Frost Clan is aware that something is brewing in 10 Towns, like there is something coming, and there are also some people down here whose goals align with their own. I said it in a passing comment kind of way, but it's a way more important factor than I think Carl has realised. I don't know if you'll take it to heart. This I will reveal to you. It's kind of an allusion to the possibility that there are factions here, specifically in this case, the Assembly, the Atom, which is working with the Kotu. With Frostman. Again, it was a bit of a small mention, but it's interesting to see if like it gets remembered or pushed aside, basically, when push comes to shove. Forsman also did ask like if plans were being made to attack, and that's where that kind of came from. It was like, no, that like we're not, nothing's going to happen, but things are in place. The like specialist also mentioned that they're going to travel to Windmoon Crag, which is said to be this major operations center for the outcasts, and also home to a white dragon, which Forsburn kind of remembers at this point. And they said, "Are you going to stay? You stay down here. We'll find you, and we'll have a job for you once we're back." And basically after receiving and kind of giving the Frost Clan salute for the first time in ages, the elite group kind of just wanders off back north. Forsman does, of course, kind of have the, well, I can't trust these guys, and like you can imagine, like the immense conflict that Forsburn must be feeling, like this lack of feeling of belonging to anything, and like where to place his allegiances, tackling what he has been taught with what he's experienced and his lifestyle and whatever else, plus the trauma, what's happened. He's probably the most confused character, the most interesting emotionally and psychologically character at the table. And it'll be interesting to see what Cole does with it and where it might go and what will happen to him and all this other stuff and what bits we'll get to explore with that. This encounter, I will mention, how I had originally planned to be like a near deadly kind of combat. The original idea was going to be that they would basically, the group would get to the cart, the Khotum would reveal themselves, and it would be an incredibly tough fight. They might bring, a bunch of them would go down. The runaways might be able to get, kill one of them maybe, at which point they would retreat and there'd just be like a constant menace going forward. They would like harass them, as they would be like taunting Forsburn. There would be this impression that they know who he is, and then from there it would like start to garner some questions from the runaways. They start pinning things on Forsburn, like who are these guys, what the hell is going on, which I think would have been interesting. Would have been another angle that we could have pursued this Forsburn backstory stuff. But it didn't happen that way. There was a unique blend of the things Forsburn had said. The scent of blood on him was a big thing. Like, they were ready to kill him the moment he revealed themselves, but then they sensed, okay, there's a bunch of different things, a bunch of clever roles, really unique set of circumstances that ended up the way it ended up, and I definitely think it's for the better. It's always nice when something you don't foresee happens and kind of makes it better. So from there, Forsburn returns to the group, and they're all immediately like, what the hell is going on? What was that all about? And then it's like you couldn't hear it, and obviously they couldn't see what was happening given the blizzard. and he basically kind of just shrugs them off, like giving the smallest ounces of information, and even like outright lying to them. And uh, no one, I couldn't believe this, absolutely no one asked for an insight check. I fussed that Carl messaged me at the time. It was like, I can't believe no one is insighting me. And like, I'm kind of happy that, well, it would have been interesting if they did, because they'd be able to catch him out and it would grow more tensions. But I think a part of that is just Rayner wants to trust him. I think it's something we talk about in our little chat, which is we'll talk about at the end. The players, I think, are just a bit uneasy to distrust people, but I don't know. We will see what happens, I guess, as with all things, when we continue to go from here in future sessions. But yeah, they don't insight him; they just take him for his word, and after a very blasé and brief discussion, they just simply continue to East Haven. And kind of like from this point, Carl just keeps messaging, so like, wow, that was easy, you know, that kind of woo, kind of moment. So at this point, like, some of the Will's suspicion and mistrust, you know, I should imagine should be building in the other two, but like I said, I don't know if it is. Like, a whole lot has happened with Forsberg in this session in particular, and you know, he's been more shifty than usual. We talk a little bit about this in the fireside chat with Dan. I think Dan himself is suspicious, but Rayner is holding on to that hope. Mutiny's player, I've not been able to talk to about it really recently, so we will see what happens, I guess. Then we'll see what happens to build up some of these suspicions. What do you guys think? Like, if you were a player in this situation with Forsberg as another player at the table, like, what kind of things would your characters be doing in the light of his kind of shiftiness? So what would be your thoughts about his character? It would be interesting to hear what you have to say about that. And like, of course, this is all like this whole tense thing. Who can we trust? This is the idea of the original concept for the inspiration behind the campaign. Is that whole, you know, the thing, the paranoia, that whole, we are maybe a party, but are these secrets that we all have going to tear us apart? They're going to be the downfall. It's kind of bringing some of that back, which is hopefully being felt by some of the other players. You know, this tension between the group. So moving on from that, the players will do eventually arrive in East Haven, and they meet up with Hruna at Captain Imdra's office. And it's there that they find, obviously, Captain Indra and Hruna, alongside the gentleman they don't recognise, actually, who I describe as like in this nice, well-made red clothes, and it's like somewhat noble in appearance, like with this slicked back hair. They have like this cane, and they also appear like somewhat frail as well. This is, of course, introduced as the Speaker of East Haven, who has recently recovered from the spell placed on him by the wizard that East Haven had burnt. He isn't able really to speak, but he is able to kind of nod to Captain Indra's, you know, her assumptions, and like her acting out his wills, basically. And she passes on his thanks on his behalf, giving the group 200 platinum, and also names them, apart from Forsberg and Dagner, who she hasn't met before, she names them Skolder. Much like they are Skolder of Tourmaline, they're now building up this reputation of being like these local heroes in some of these places. And it is from here where Hruna kind of butts in, interrupts the formalities, and gets quite irate about the whole situation that she has to talk to them about. In short, the East Haven ferry has gone missing, and this is something they also noticed as they walked into town, alongside with the figurehead of pure oath glass that was on it. She also says that there's like no sign of Heresy, who was the tiefling guy in the pub, who was actually the owner of it, but couldn't really move it. You know, wasn't really operating it, I should say, with lack of interest. Of course, like you and I know where Heresy is, and Stronus knows where he is because he's doing something for Stronus. And yeah, Haruna also claims on her, she takes off her brooch, her descending brooch, and says that she has heard an unfamiliar voice on the end of it, and that someone has obviously been listening to them, and that's how they've been able to stay ahead of her and elude her, like intel gathering missions, because they've been listening to Reyna talk to Stronus every night, telling them what they've been doing. So whoever this enemy is, like in quotation marks, who of course she thinks is the Draugr, she thinks it's the fallen Jorga, is why they've been able to stay ahead of them. And she also uses that as evidence to support, look, they've stolen the ferry. This is obviously, they've got some sort of plan. They're so bold in doing it now that they must be moving it forward. They're so confident we can't do anything. And with the brooches, I don't know if you harken back to a really early episode. Do you remember I did say to you guys that, like with Gora, like Gora has disappeared. And we changed it where he is working with the Dwagar. It's finally coming to light. I don't know if they're eventually going to put these pieces together, but it is there. They can figure this out, like what is happening. They know he's made it. Blah blah blah. They can figure that start figuring those things out. But will they? We don't know. So back to Haruna anyway. Yeah, she's going like nuts at this point. Just like, we've got no fucking information to go off. They seem to be miles ahead of us. We have no clue what is going on. There is obviously something going on, but we just have so little information. She is convinced that the Fallen are doing something, the Twagar, and she basically says to them, we are leaving right now. You and I, we're going right now to follow this boat because it's the only thing we know, or we can't be left in the dark this long, and we have to keep our intel off of these brooches because something is watching us, something knows. And yeah, and she kind of just sets off without them, and like in a full adventure attire, and then in the next following sessions they're going to get to see her cool stuff that she can do. And yeah, it's basically there where we left it. I may have left out / forgotten a few different bits and bobs, but you get the main parts of it. A lot of great roleplay moments, and getting back to the premise of like the entire campaign is a good thing. Building up those tensions. And again, apologies, I just simply cannot emulate how great this session was. It really, really was some great moments. I really should have like recorded it or something, I don't know, but it would have ended up being really long videos. Very interesting indeed. Super excited to see what happens moving forward. Oh yeah, before I forget, I did say I want to talk about Reyna's freezing and seeing her Shadow Beast thing. So I included that because I realised I hadn't been doing it a lot, and like we've recently like had a few things like with her dreams and things, but I felt like a mixture of that and like given the trauma of the events that happens and the depths of her rage that she can get to, it was time to bring bring the pace forward again some more, and perhaps have it be a more emergent and more threatening, because at one point in her backstory it did manifest and wiped out the entire village. I want the threat of that to be there. You know, it's the last secret of hers that she has to let go, more or less. And I want that to be a threat. So we will start building upon that more as we move forward as well. Try not to bleed too many stories together. I say that. Try not to move the spotlight, I should say. Like, it was clearly on Forsburn for this one. You know, once we get into Reyna's arc, if they decide to pursue it, you know, we don't want to have, Stronus and Reyna's arc are all blending into one, or, you know, Mutiny's arc when that comes up, you know. So we will leave it there for today. I've had a little chat with Dan, like I mentioned, Reyna's player, where we discussed some of this stuff and things with her, things with his character on the Fireside chat. So if you haven't already checked that out, I'd appreciate it if you would. There's some good insights there. That was recorded before this, so there may be some different mishaps, and you maybe get some different insights that I haven't included in this campaign diary. Anyway, I'm looking forward Well, I will say I'm looking forward to our next big chat with Carl, our next fireside one, so we continue to talk about his character stories, and we get a chance to hear his views on like the events since last time. Like, it's going to be a good, nice, meaty, maybe set of like 20 sessions between each one. It's going to be a good, another little catch up. I do enjoy talking to Carl about this stuff. So, this has been session 16, Past and Prejudice, and we will see you guys next time.